Greetings, friends, and welcome to the What's Right show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. Happy Friday. I am back behind the What's Right microphone for my trip. So here on the 11th of April, and forgive me, last couple days, I just could not get to doing the show. Yesterday I was traveling. I was in the air, so that's a little bit tricky to do. And then the second, Wednesday was just my last day on the ground, so could not get to it. Forgive me, folks, but today I'm here. I'm prepared to tackle everything and explain it all to you. By the way, What's Right show on X. Now I talk about X, I talk about Twitter. Some of you don't have it. You can just create an account in your web browser, on your phone, download the app, whichever it is. But that's where I'm posting all show-related news. So if I've got an absence, things like that, updates, you can follow me there. So at What's Right Sam, at What's Right Show is the show Twitter X account. And then, of course, my email, sam@whatsrightshow.com. All right. Now, with that out of the way, let me tell you, of course, the big news are these. There's lots going on, but the tariff war is heating up. And, Trump put his pause in for basically any and all countries who came to the table and were willing to talk to Trump and open a line of communication, who did not retaliate, which essentially means the European Union, Canada, many Asian countries, basically everyone but the Chi-Coms. Now, I was one of the first people to tell you that this trade war was all about China. It was all about China from the beginning. And now this is, I think, becoming quite obvious that the Chinese now being the lone country out there to have massive tariffs levied against them. I saw this morning China raised the retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods up to the 125%. China is, folks, absolutely in a very, very bad place. And if you're pointing to the Chinese stock market as an example of why I'm wrong, then I have to tell you something. The Chinese are doing what they always do. They're cheating. And the cheat here is that the government of China, the Communist Party, is buying up and supporting stocks where people are in China understanding that this is a tremendous blow to the Chinese economy, that losing, prospectively, the U.S. market as an export market is a disaster for China. It accounts for a third to a half of their total economy. So this is not good. So people are absolutely selling. They're fire selling their stocks, and the Chinese government is there to pick up the pieces. It is a form of government bailout. But this market interventionism only exacerbates the problem. China's debt is spiraling out of control for the first time, worse than even ours. And where this goes from here is, if someone blinks, it's going to have to be the Chinese. Now, I think what the Chinese Communist Party is banking on is that they're around for life and Trump isn't. They're expecting that if they can just dig their heels in and not trade with the U.S. and create maximum pain vis-a-vis business between China and the U.S., enough political pressure will come on Trump and the Republicans. Republicans will lose the midterms. Democrats will seize control of Congress, and those Democrats will begin to make things very difficult for Trump, preventing him from enforcing these tariffs, etc. That's the play. That's I would say, the weakness inherent in our democracy. Now, the weakness, of course, in China's political system and economic system is that it's so state-controlled and so rigid that it has no means of blowing off steam and releasing pressure that they are not immune to. politically speaking, Americans have this benefit of elections. People can, change governments and let their voices be known. And it's overall a good thing for folks, to be engaged and to remain plugged into the system, right? In China, they don't have this. I mean, I am imagining that the regime is starting to really, and this is in the wake of COVID. Remember, the president of China, was a big COVID lockdown guy and let people basically, in some cases, people who were COVID positive were imprisoned in their apartments. The police would come and nail doors shut and seal people in their buildings. I just crazy stuff. And so, smarting from that, now the Chi-Coms are going to really buckle down and make things even worse. And the ordinary Chinese people will be economically impacted by this in a huge way. Imagine your Foxconn, which is the company that manufactures the iPhone, for example. I mean, what portion of their workforce exists to fulfill orders in the United States of America? I mean, it has to be half of their total workforce. What happens when those people get pink slips? I know that the Chinese government will come in and do some form of stimulus, of bailout money, like our government did in the wake of COVID, give people unemployment. But this now increases inflation, creates even further problems. See, so the whole thing is a mess. Trump's objective here is to completely renegotiate the deal that we have with China. It was a bad deal from the very beginning. And everybody, we all know this, right? China does what? Takes advantage of us on the trade equation. They steal our intellectual properties. There's a joke among business people in China, in the U.S., doing business in China. They said, well, they don't have copyright in China. They just have copy it right. That's the Chinese motto. And it's this joke, right? But it's 100% true. And we don't seem to be willing to do anything about it. American companies who get their IP raided by Chinese competitors don't have a sympathetic ear with our government. Ought to protect us. Our government ought to step in on our behalf and say, if you continue to do this, China, if you don't prosecute these acts of criminal infringement, we will stop trading with you. Nobody threatens this. We just continue to do business with China because it makes our folks on Wall Street happy. And so Trump's come along and says, enough of this. We're not sacrificing our country to keep, Wall Street booming on fumes, have the top 1% of the 1% that lives in the Upper East Side of Manhattan living like kings, while American workers, Main Street businesses, everything from mom and pop shops to large domestically held corporations getting short shrifted. This is nothing short of one of the most momentous times in our nation's history. And when I see criticisms of this, when I see the Dems piling on saying there's no strategy and this, that, and look, I understand they're desperate to talk about something and fight back on Trump on something, right? But to me, it is so deeply unpatriotic to right now demand that our president capitulate to a country that literally despises us, that has abused us, that has trashed us, and to take the side, this is what Democrats are doing, to take the side of China right now, I think is one of the most despicable things I've seen the Democratic Party do in my lifetime. Now, I'm not surprised by any of it. It doesn't shock me. But I'm just telling you, it's not a good look. What happens when these jobs begin to come back? What happens when we start to build factories again? What happens when big labor and little labor and all labor falls in line with the Republican Party? I mean, the Democrats as a force, we are watching them literally self-destruct. And it ties into with a lot of other things that are happening this week. Look at Colorado. The Democrats in Colorado literally pass a pro-trans bill that gives the state of Colorado the power to take your kids from you if you dispute your child's new gender identity. You dead name your kid, the state of Colorado, the Democrats gone wild there will take your kid from you. You know, we have not been in a long time in a place where there is so much daylight between the Republicans and the Democrats in our government. The Republican Party today, in 2025, stands behind American exceptionalism, stands behind American greatness, stands behind American workers, American businesses. And we have a Democrat Party that is intent on actually, not in words, but in action, is intent on destroying the working and middle classes of our country, siding with China over our own workers, and then literally taking children from parents who just maybe know a little bit more about their kids' mental health than the state. I mean, there's lots of examples I could give. I mean, that are just so wayward, away from where the heart of this country is. And that today, folks, is the modern Democratic Party. I don't think they're long for this world. I really don't. I think Trump needs to stay the course and keep doing popular things, including putting China in its place. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam & Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Greetings and welcome back. What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. So this week, one of the things that happened is Trump held another open to the press cabinet meeting. And really what he's doing here, and it's brilliant, and it's absolutely how these things should go, is it's an opportunity for the public to hear directly from all the department heads. Right? Yes, I know they're cabinet secretaries, but really they're heads of various departments, various functions in the government. And we as Americans can tune in and watch on television live as the president, the big boss of the country, is going around the room and, like a CEO at a company, conducting, hey, Pete Hegseth, tell me about what's going on. What are we doing? What's the Department of Defense? What's the update? And so they went around the room like this. And one of the things that came out in this particular meeting is Howard Lutnick did a characterization of what's going on behind the scenes as far as countries wanting to negotiate with the Trump administration. So Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick Thursday in the televised cabinet meeting had this to say.
I think Scott and I'm not sure we could ever have enough time in the day to talk to all these countries because they want to talk and they want to talk now. And they have come with offers that they never, ever, ever would have come with, but for the moves that the president has made demanding that people treat the United States with respect. We're getting the respect we deserve now, and I think you're going to see historic deals, one after the other. And then I'm very excited that within a week and a half, we're going to start with the gold card. And the Trump card is coming out, and we're very excited about that. And that's coming soon. So very excited.
You know, I just want to remind you folks, when we talked about the Democrats wanting to do this little stunt where they're going to have a shadow cabinet. They're going to have a shadow cabinet. Remember, this is, I think, Ken Martin's brainchild, who's the new chair of the Democratic Party. Anyway, so his idea was, the Democrats are going to have their own experts, just waiting in the wings to demonstrate to the American people what it looks like when the adults are in charge. And I had another thought about this, Rob, because one of my takeaways from watching Trump go around the room is every person that speaks, I'm like, competence, competence, competence. I spent the last 4 years when, obviously Biden was terrible and he didn't have his faculties. But, when Biden would talk, you just go, oh my gosh, terrible, right? But when Alejandro Mayorkas talked, or Janet Yellen talked, or any of these clowns, Pete Buttigieg, it wasn't like you were suddenly left with, oh, good, there are some adults in charge, even though in the lead up to the 2020 election, one of the arguments, and I would call it a central pivotal argument that the Biden campaign made, was to malign Trump's administration as one run by children. And when you looked at polling in the lead up to 2020, a lot of Americans out there felt like it was time for some, for some, mature leadership and calming, the storm, calm waters and all that, and voted for Biden on the principle of wanting stability, wanting competence, wanting reliability. And instead, what they gave America was an open border and an economy held together by pins and needles, right? Glued together like some paper mache art piece your kid would do in the 3rd grade. And that was our economy. And every time they needed to win an election, they did something that put America, quantifiably in a worse position just to slightly boost economic numbers so they could come to the table going, look, Bidenomics works. So here Lutnick is saying, look, hey, Trump's come in here, admittedly, with a wrecking ball. And, we've brought everybody to the table. People are calling us and they're negotiating directly. And we saw this, I wouldn't describe the government of, for example, Australia being particularly friendly to Trump, but the Australians rejected overtures from the Chinese this week and have decided to go and say, no, we're going to negotiate a deal with the U.S. Trump wants to economically isolate China. And if there's nothing you understand from this but this, Trump wants to see to it that countries around the world choose us or them. You pick. You want to do business with the Chi-Coms? God bless you. You want to do business with the U.S.? We're here for you. If Trump can peel away Europe, if Trump can peel away, Australia, half of Asia, Vietnam, for example, India is another market that I believe, Trump has a good relationship with Modi. So I really think that that's the play. And that could be, again, the very same people out there who rush into any hot war, kinetic war with people dying, missiles being fired, bullets, whizzing through the air. Those same people are like, oh, but we can't have a trade war. Oh my gosh. And it's fascinating because we can do much more damage to China in 1 year of a trade war with no missiles, no soldiers, no anything that we would ever be able to inflict on them, I think, if a military confrontation were to happen today. So to me, this is all part of a larger plan, and I see it. And the fact that Trump isn't articulating it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just that's what Trump, you don't do this. You don't tell people what your big picture is. It's not how you negotiate. My gosh. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Quick break here, bottom of the hour. Be right back in a moment. Hi, friends. Welcome to the What's Right show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. I am back in the country. Had a good flight in yesterday from Europe. By the way, folks, I don't know, those of you who travel internationally, I have to share something with you here. I love Las Vegas. I love flying in, going through customs in Las Vegas. I know I've heard people having bad experiences. I have never had more than maybe 2 people in line in front of me. And if you compare this to landing in a hellhole like LAX or JFK, you could be even, okay, if you have global pre-check or whatever, but if you're just flying in on a U.S. passport, the line at LAX you feel like you're getting processed at Ellis Island. Okay, you really do. It is not good. And here in Vegas, you just roll right up, Robbie. You just go into, there's like 5 people working in one flight. And everybody sort of gets off the plane and, sort of as you're walking in, sort of spread out a little bit. And just telling you, just love it. And grateful that we have a nice airport here. One of my favorite things. Okay. So what with all of this economic talk and what does this mean for us? And what is, where are we headed with this? Folks, dig your heels in. I told you this was not going to get sorted out right away, but I also want you to pay careful attention to the folks that had a week ago apocalyptic predictions were all wrong. And I include in that a number of prominent, conservatives and smart people on Wall Street. And I think that's what irks me. Last Sunday, a week ago, right? Over the weekend, people were predicting a Black Monday stock market crash. It didn't really materialize. Obviously, the market has been, and I looked at the Dow Jones Industrial. I checked it today. I looked at it. And Robbie, it's been like up and down, up and down. If you look at a 5-year, okay, it's just to give you, it's nothing huge. It's nothing crazy. Meanwhile, if you look at other stock markets, huge disasters. And the Chinese market, the only reason that they're like the Shanghai index and everything is holding relatively stable is because the Chi-Coms are pumping in money that they almost don't have. It's a disaster in the making for them. And this is why, again, the pain that we are suffering here is actually quite minimal compared to what other countries are experiencing. And if you are hostile to Trump, if you don't believe me in this, let me ask you something. You saw how pissy the Canadians are getting. I mean, it's to the point where when we have hockey games, they boo our anthem. Canada hates us right now. And by the way, I don't care. I hate away, Canadians. Enjoy. But my point is, it's bad when the guy who is running to be Prime Minister of Canada, okay, this Carney guy who just showed up, waltzed in from Europe and is pretending to be Canadian again, and he may win, right? I mean, he may win. They may have another liberal government because Canada never misses an opportunity to shoot itself in the foot, but I digress. The guy who is running as the stick it to Trump candidate is at the very same time begging America for a deal. And the reason they're doing it is because they know they need it. So the one thing I have to tell you is, again, even if you think that Trump is a buffoon, even if you think that he is an idiot, you've got to look at the fact. If Canada didn't need us, I am telling you that in the midst of very high, perhaps the highest nationalistic fervor and pride of country that the Canadians have ever felt in their history, that they would do anything to raise two middle fingers straight at Washington, D.C. and tell Trump to suck it, and we'll see you in 4 years, America. Sayonara. But the fact that they're not doing it tells me everything I need to know. They can't afford to do it. And then I have to say, well, heck, I'm kind of glad that my president understands the leverage that we have, because I sort of feel like past presidents of the United States have just laid down for everybody. Since when are we supposed to just lay down for people? I don't get this. Oh, yeah, it's going to make goods more expensive. Well, yeah, this is, like, isn't it funny? Like, the same people out there that are grousing about, oh, the price of goods is going to go up. And I say to them, well, all right, Susie Q liberal, like, prices are going to go up, but it's going to support American workers. Don't you like that? Oh, I don't, it's a world economy, Sam. You don't understand these things. I go, I know some of these people, right? I know I know what they do. The same people that are arguing with me, right? These are people who will pay literally 30 times a price of some, carrot or bok choy or whatever from a farmer's market just to support local. They do this, right? It's the same libs. And now they're melting down. Gosh forbid that somebody in J.D. Vance's hometown get his job back at a steel mill or at a factory. Gosh forbid that Carrier build AC units in the country. That we produce, companies like Eaton produce semiconductors and other pieces of vital technology for our power grid in the United States. But this is all over people's heads, so they obsess over stupid stuff like parsley, and then completely turn into globalists when it comes to things that actually do matter. Because I don't, this from Trump's first term, they found out that the Chinese were putting kill switches. This isn't a conspiracy theory. Like, this actually is real. They're putting kill switches in Chinese-made semiconductors. And Robbie, you've seen, this. They had the, and so they put in an absolute stop and prohibition on any of these particular items being made, because China could, in a war with us, could press a button and, America goes dark. Literally, they probably have some like remote control. They could turn us into North Korea overnight. Okay, lights out. And Trump said, no, we can't do that. We got to stop that. And the minute that Biden comes into office, that gets reversed. Again, the so-called adults, the so-called reasonable people. Oh, don't we wish when we had a country that was run by folks that just didn't rock the boat? Crowd, I will say to them, is those people, y'all were sleepwalking us into an absolute nightmare. Imagine being beholden economically and strategically to your biggest adversary. And this has been my frustration, Robbie, in the past 4 years. I'm no fan of Putin. Again, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but it's Russia, 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 Russia. Da, 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 da. Okay. Side note, those people over there in China, pretty scary, right? They're pumping out aircraft carriers. They're pumping out battleships. They're building up their military. They're doing stuff that we're not doing. And I'm supposed to be like bugaboo scared about Putin, who last I checked, I think half of his warships are kind of out of service and rusting in port. So we drifted into collective, idiocy in the last 4 years as a country. And Trump's coming in here and he gets it. And he is like this honey badger that don't care. He's just coming in like a wrecking ball, gonna fix it. And he is fixing it. And by the way, getting China out of the Panama Canal. This also happened yesterday at the press conference, the cabinet meeting. Pete Hegseth reported on a meeting that he'd had in Panama the day earlier, and saying he just got back from Panama and they are doing everything to oust the Chicoms from the canal.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yes, Mr. President, we just got back from Panama last night. We were at the Panama Canal with their Southcom commander ships, F-18s, troops, and signed a couple of historic deals. One which is with the Panama Canal Authority, a framework for U.S. vessels first and free through the Panama Canal. Right. And then also a memorandum of understanding with their security minister for the presence of U.S. troops. Fort Sherman is an old U.S. base there, as well as their naval station and air station, jointly with Panama to secure the Panama Canal from Chinese influence. That's something you said, we're taking back the canal. China's had too much influence. Obama and others let them creep in. We, along with Panama, are pushing them out, sir. And so we had a very successful trip there. President Molino sends his regards, very complimentary of the U.S. as he's a great ally, and I think they want the Communist Chinese out. And with our troops there partnering with their forces, we've got a chance to push them all the way out, sir.
We've moved a lot of troops to Panama and filled up some areas that we used to have, and we didn't have any longer, but we have them now. And I think it's in very good control, right?
Love it. I mean, I just want this injected straight into my veins, Robbie. All of this. I'm here for all of this. And to the reporters that ask, is this what you voted for? Is this what you voted for, Sam? The answer is a resounding hell yes. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Be back in a moment. Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian behind the What's Right microphone. Welcome to the program. So, inflation way down, 2.4% in March. That's the annualized rate. It is less than expected and significantly below February's rate of 2.8%. So Trump's first term average year over year was 2.46%. And you know what Biden's 4-year, year over year average was for his term? 4.95%. In other words, double of what Trump's was. And why? Again, why? The answer is simple. The enormous Biden stimulus package passed at the beginning of his term wrought absolute havoc on our economic markets. The $1.9 trillion of fake, created out of thin air money made everybody poor. And the euphoria of the initial injection of liquidity into our markets wore off very quickly as Americans struggled to buy basic food necessities. This is the legacy of the quote-unquote adults in the room running the economy. We could have taken the pain from the COVID shutdown and said, listen, kids, let's get back to work. We gotta hit this. We gotta do this. But because Biden was beholden to the mask crazy, COVID crazy, nut jobs, he couldn't just send people back to work. Instead, the government kowtowed to the lunatics, kept things closed up, and supplemented or ameliorated the pain, the economic pain caused by this by dropping free money into the economy. And then predictably, everything went up, prices, etc. You know how it went. And now we're finally getting it under control. This is all good stuff, in other words. And by the way, the March numbers don't really account for the further drop that's going to happen this month. And I think here, folks, I think that the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell hates Trump, right? He's a deep state guy. I don't want to oversimplify this, but he's not somebody who's going to go out there and really want to help this administration. But Trump is playing a big game of chicken with him because you've got the people's, the PRC, the what is it, the PBOC? Is that it? The People's Bank of China, I think is their official name. But no, the point is that they're running a lot of help, of interference, if you will, on behalf of the Chinese government, fixing the economy. But the Fed has done nothing so far. They're just sitting by going, well, let's see how this goes. But Trump, I think, wants to force the Fed to move. I mean, we want lower interest rates, right? Anybody refinanced a mortgage lately or bought a new house? Ouch. Certainly afford to buy a lot less now. And I think for folks out there with a budget, it's just impossible. It's very difficult. So again, this is all, I think, a part of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. Very, very important. Okay. Yes, I saw the consumer sentiment sinks. Oh, this means basically how people feel positive about making purchases, holding off on purchases, holding off on vacations. Obviously, with uncertainty comes, some jitters. It's worry's highest since 1981. Well, what happened in 1981? Reagan got to task about rebuilding America. How did that work out? Really well. Where was consumer sentiment by 1984, for example? By the time Ronald Reagan ran for re-election, well, we all know that was one of the largest blowouts in 1984 in I think in U.S. history. Did Reagan win every state, Robbie? Remind me what the numbers were. A lot. I mean, it was a landslide victory. Everyone except Minnesota, where Mondale was from. So anyway, again, those of you out there fretting that things are bad, remember, consumer sentiment means people are going to spend a little bit less right now. Okay, but what does that do to inflation? Remember, for every action, there's a reaction. So it'll help with inflation, get inflation, continue to have inflation drop where it needs to be. And then what? Then listen, at the same time, companies from around the world coming here to invest. I mean, do you know even that Louis Vuitton, right? The LVMH, the company based in France, luxury goods, right? Trump has a very good relationship with the head of LVMH. His name, I think, is Arnault, French billionaire, wealthiest man in France, and one of the wealthiest men in Europe. But anyway, they've opened a factory. They have a factory in Texas where they make Louis Vuitton stuff. A lot of people don't even know this, but these kind of things can happen, and they will employ Americans. Those Americans will get paychecks that they didn't have before, and those paychecks will be spent in the economy. And you don't have to be, again, you don't have to be a Nobel Prize winning, laureate economist to understand that cycle, once it catches, is going to create an economic renaissance in the country that you and I have not seen in our lifetimes. It will rival anything that happened in this country between 1981 and 1984, when Reagan had to pick the country as it was left by Jimmy freaking Carter and turned us into back into a leading economy of the world. It's time for a rethink. That's what I'm getting at here. That's what I think is good that is coming from all of this. Now, speaking of rethinks, there are examples of the left starting to figure out that stuff has to be rethought and reimagined. From San Francisco to Oregon, but not Colorado. I'll get into this when we come back, because this story out of Colorado, this is a prime example of the Democrats gone wild that still do not get it. They still are doubling down on this ridiculous far left woke ideology, and I think it's going to burn them in a huge way. My email, Sam at whatsrightshow.com. Almost gave you the old email. Sam at whatsrightshow.com. And of course, on X, find me at whatsrightsam. Top of the hour here. I'm here in the studio. Don't worry. I'll be right back and tell you everything you need to know about this. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., here on News Talk 840 KXNT. And of course, those of you out there joining us on the podcast, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, great to have you with us as well. Rob, even get downloads in Canada, deep behind enemy lines. And I know I've said last hour a few pejorative things about our brothers north of the border, and I want to say something very, very clear. I know a lot of great Canadians, including my own uncle who lives in Alberta, in a place called Camrose, which is in kind of the middle of nowhere outside of Edmonton. And I'll tell you, he's a very conservative guy. Can you imagine living in a country where you get it and it's run by someone named Justin Trudeau? I mean, I would lose my mind. You know how many Canadians, and I've gotten these emails, by the way. My email, sam at whatsrightshow.com, incidentally. I've gotten emails from folks in Canada who say, I love the show, and we wish we had a Donald Trump. And by the way, a guy like Donald Trump could win it in Canada. And the reason that, Pierre Poilievre didn't, is floundering, right? Robbie, have you seen his numbers? When Trudeau was in government in Canada, when Trudeau was in, he was such a buffoon. Everything was just coming apart. Trudeau comes into the government has as a surplus. And Trudeau, in the course of his tenure, puts Canada in like a 60, maybe $70 billion Canadian dollar deficit. Absolute disaster. So they've got this, conservative party leader, Poilievre, and he's a smart guy, but he's kind of bookish. He's kind of a dork. He kind of puts off slightly Mike Johnson vibes, like a little guy. I don't know how tall he is. I've never met him, but he just looks like a little guy. And there's literally nothing alpha about him. And so this trade dispute begins with Trump. And Poilievre starts to sound like a beta liberal. Well, this really isn't very nice of America to do this. And in that moment, he lost the election. You know how many Canadians are waiting for someone with some balls to come in and be like, you know what? Trump's right. And what we need to do is understand why he's right. We need to fix things in our country. And then we need to be the friends and reliable partners of America that Trump wants us to be. Trump isn't saying piss off Canada. He's saying, hey, let's make this fair. There's nothing unfair about that demand, and he's actually right. Now, let's get to the table. Let's make this happen, and let's make Canada great again. And a guy who comes along and does that could win. Absolutely. And the reason why conservatives around the world, if they are intelligent enough and follow, alternative news sources and don't just conservatives, again, we do typically. We don't tune into CNN to get our facts, quote unquote. But why conservatives all around the world go, yeah, we love Trump and we wish Trump was in our own country. Now, I'm reason I'm saying all of this, not just to apologize slightly here for offending Canadians earlier in the program. That's not what this is all about. I'm just telling you that in order to vanquish the left, in order to win this, in order to regain political and cultural dominance as conservatives here in the U.S. and across the world, I think it's important. We cannot be weak. And we have to force every single issue, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And the other side, the political left in the U.S. right now, is a little bit lost and disoriented, but they're still fighting for dear life. Now, the good news, right, is that you're seeing a number of leftists formally committed to absolute, complete mass destruction of society start to rethink things. And I welcome rethinks, right? I mean, I like to see, for example, San Francisco, this is a headline a couple days ago, that it's looking to basically, redo how this is a drug paraphernalia hands out. They basically have been giving people, syringes and that kind of stuff to do drugs in. And it was like, oh, we're going to do this to help drug users be clean and not get HIV, share needles, and all this stuff. Well, what do you think happened? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, oh, well, look, if you make it easier for people to do drugs, more people are going to do drugs, and they're going to do it out in public. What did you think was going to happen, Sherlock? I mean, of course. So you go to what ought to be one of the wealthiest cities in the world, and was at one point San Francisco. You go there and you leave a fancy Michelin-starred restaurant. There's some guy right in front laying on the sidewalk with a syringe sticking out of him. And I've seen this with my own eyes. Have to be like, oh, kids, don't do drugs. Look at that. Awkward stuff. So they're rethinking that. I saw somewhere that even Oregon is coming around. They legalized drugs, and so they did, mass decriminalization, and what happened? Well, it turned into an absolute nightmare there. But oh my gosh, Colorado! This is one of the biggest, most shameful news stories of the entire week. Because the government of Colorado, the state legislature in Colorado, has passed this law. This is absolute insanity. HB 25-1312, legal protections for transgender individuals. Oh, yes, legal protections for. It is absolutely insane. If you do not affirm your child's gender, you are committing child abuse and can lose custody of your child. That's the headline. Have they not learned anything? Have they not? The answer is no, they haven't. And I'll get to this here, and I've got some great clips of legislators, in Colorado defending and fighting against this, both sides. I have to tell you, sometimes I will say things on this program where when I then go back and I listen to it, I go, I'm almost maybe went too far. And one of the things that I periodically will say here is I will say, there's not a lot of daylight between Democrats and communists. And of course, my parents came here from a communist country, grew up under Stalin in Eastern Europe. And, I've heard a lot about it, maybe more so than many of you, because I just grew up with it, as a kid, heard about it nonstop. And one of the defining features of communism is that your kids are not really your kids. Your kids belong to society. And this is one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton's, whole "takes a village to raise a child" wasn't as innocently innocuous as it may have sounded to some. This idea that the government of Colorado, remember California playing with this too, can take your kid from you because you go, "No, you're Bobby. You were born a boy. Son, you're a boy. You may be depressed. You may be confused about things. Let's talk to somebody. Let's get you some help. But you're not a girl." If you do that with your kid in Colorado, you lose parental rights. This isn't about, by the way, gender affirmation. This isn't about helping trans people. This is about radically remaking society by making sure that parents understand that the kids are the property of the state. That is what this is about fundamentally. And it's the most un-American, undemocratic concept to possibly think of. For me as a conservative, there is nothing really more sacred than the family unit. And the left has sought the destruction of the family unit from the beginning of time. This, by the way, why leftists love public schools, and they want to make it mandatory that your kid go to a public school. And by the way, if you dare opt out and go to the private school, maximum economic pain for you. No, you don't get vouchers. No, you don't get any tax incentives. No, you don't get anything because you opted out of the system. How dare you? And homeschooling, my goodness. Why would anybody in Colorado ever send their kid to a public school where they're going to have, drag queen story hour from kindergarten on up, where they're going to be constantly propagandized with age-inappropriate sexual content? And then if your child succumbs to it, you lose your kid, or you go along with it. You lose your kid in either event, right? This is unbelievable. And I have to look it up, by the way. I bet you there's a prohibition on kids getting tattoos even with parental consent, like we have here in Nevada. I mean, think about that. Your kid wants to go get a tattoo. You can't, as a parent, go with a young child to get a tattoo. You'll end up in prison. But if your child says, "Oh, I'd like to take some Lupride that will forever sterilize me. I want to take it starting at 10. In Colorado, if you say no, you lose your child. It's the most unbelievable, crazy development. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, the What's Right Show, is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
The Sam and Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. So obviously this development in Colorado is just absolutely insane. This is a bill passed by the legislature, their Colorado House of Representatives, which would make it basically a crime for parents to misgender or dead name their kids. So if you have, like, my son Daniel, if he decides to be, turn into a Susie or whatever, as I keep calling him Daniel, could lose custody of my kid. It's wild. They prevented a debate, by the way. The House Democrats rammed this through, did it, all on the fly, codifying into law Democrats' ideology striking into the heart of the family unit. These people are lunatics. And here's, by the way, right, this is This was on the 1st, on April 1st, Representative Zara Zoka. And this is basically doctors who disagree with trans ideology are like listening to the KKK. Get an idea of what the debate like this would have been if the Democrats had allowed it to happen.
We don't get to have a difference of opinion over somebody's basic rights. And recognizing that trans people exist is not a matter of political opinion. We've heard a lot about stakeholding and who was left out of stakeholding. And this process is important for us to understand the implications of the bills that we are passing. But a well-stakeholded bill does not need to be discussed with hate groups. And we don't ask someone passing civil rights legislation to go ask the KKK their opinion.
Notice how typical this is for a liberal, for a Democrat to say, we don't want to hear from any experts that disagree with us. And by the way, if you're an expert that disagrees with the proper approach, what the proper approach is to child gender dysphoria, then if your position isn't our position, you're a hate group, you're a bigot, you do not deserve to be heard. We don't need to discuss it. And this is the reasoning, by the way, that the Democrats used to not even hold a debate on this, an open debate. It's really, it is really infuriating. But this is the same trick that Democrats used during COVID, right? We were demanded that we listen to, it was demanded of us. There, let me rephrase this. See, my jet lag here is not working for me. It was demanded that we listen to the experts. But the minute a doctor, a researcher, somebody came along, an expert, that disagreed with their position, that person was quickly denounced as a quack, as a fringe, as a fringe person, as a racist. When the left talks about experts, they're only talking about people that agree with them. When the left talks about democracy, they only talk about people that vote the way they want them to vote. They're the most intellectually incurious people I know, because it has nothing to do with finding the truth. It has everything to do with political power. The same representative, crazy, foaming at the mouth, leftist loon, Zara Zoka, doubled down in the Colorado State House of Representatives with this. Oh, we listened to people. Oh, it was terrible what we heard from people.
In committee, we heard a lot of opinions. We heard from groups that called trans community members groomers and pedophiles, that accuse our community members of heinous acts with children, simply because they exist, because of who they are. And then we are asked why they are not consulted in the drafting of this bill. Groups that are actively making our trans community less safe every day, asking why their language was not taken into consideration on a bill to provide legal protections for transgender individuals. I will call those groups hateful, and I am not the only person who has done so. Some of the groups in opposition to this bill are on a list of hate groups maintained by one of the most well-known civil rights law firms. And yes, I will compare that to saying it's like asking someone working on civil rights legislation to consult with white supremacist groups. And I will do that unapologetically.
Well, I don't think this kind of hyperbole is going to win any national elections for the Democratic Party. I think this is an absolute losing issue for them, and the more radical and off base that they get, the more disastrous it will be for them in the polls. Parents have to be given some rights over their kids. And when it comes actually to the trans issue, I'm one step further. I think that parents kids need to be protected from their parents. I think there's plenty of parents who are actively encouraging their kids to transition for a myriad of reasons, including, most tragically, for increased social credibility in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and other radically blue areas. And yes, I know what I'm saying. I'm actually saying that there are parents who push their kids into this stuff because it gives them a social currency that elevates their standing in their peer group among other crazed left-wing lunatic parents who all sit around going, oh, but my kid is trans, and oh, my kid is non-binary, oh, my kid is this, that, and the other. It's the must-have fashion accessory for leftist lunatics across the country. And yes, we as a society owe an interest to protect these kids from this. And I'll maintain, I'd rather err on the side of the extreme that protects a child physically and lets them make a decision later on when they're an adult than one that results in a child being scarred for life. I just think there's no way to defend that. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. What's Right Show brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. Hi, welcome to the What's Right Show. Sam Mirejovsky here, your host, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian. Great to be with you here this Friday. Finally back in the country from my travels. I mentioned this when I was in Prague. I ran into quite a lot of people when I was in Europe who all wanted to understand what the hell is going on with Trump. Sam, he's a lunatic. What you guys are doing? It's all craziness. What is going on? So I'd sit them down and give them basically a summary of what I do here day in and day out. I said, look, we have these trade imbalances. We've got, tariffs that are larger from countries that trade with us on our goods than the goods that we receive from them. And then we've got the issue of China. And then we've got about, significant $9.2 trillion of U.S. debt of treasuries that need to be refinanced this year. It's like a third of our debt. If we can disrupt the bond market, and yields right now are going up, but when this settles, if we can get this to a point where we are renegotiating these treasuries at a much lower rate, it's all going to seem like one of the most rational things for any government to do. And you start telling people this, factually, they start nodding along. Oh, okay. And they go from looking at you like, what's going on in your country to, oh, I get it. And it's all because of how things are presented in the media. The media in I think it's like this pretty much everywhere around the world. The mainstream media all kind of play by the same playbook, but in foreign media in particular, if you are a reporter who goes to the U.S. once every 5 years, and you're based in, let's say, Prague or Berlin or, name the country, right? And so you go to the U.S. as a tourist once in a while, maybe for work once in a while, but you don't live there. What do? Well, you speak a little bit of English, you read English, so you read the New York Times. You read the Washington Post. You follow mainstream media and you inform yourself on what you think is going on in the U.S. based on what some of the biggest idiots in our country have to say. People that have never been right about anything. And then what happens, then they just basically rewrite everything in Czech or German, whatever, and people just gobble it up. You're just getting, all they're getting in Europe is secondhand mainstream media horse crap. Regurgitated garbage. That's it. Now, why is this relevant? don't ever, first of all, don't ever let anybody go, oh, but they're European, they're so sophisticated. You know more about what is going on in the world by virtue of the independent media that you follow, that you consume, than many of people out there who are supremely credentialed, have high-level degrees, are, very intelligent, meaning high IQ, but are so grievously misinformed about everything in life and blindly loyal to sources of information that manipulate everything, that they actually don't have a clue about what's cooking in the real world. So we have this advantage right now. And yeah, well, I mean, look, it's important, and I think what Trump needs to do here in the U.S. is, now that he's gone in full wrecking ball and tackling the China thing, he's got to tackle it all. And unfortunately, he's got to do it all at the same time. One of the things that needs to get tackled here, too, is the election mess in the country. And look, Trump obviously needs to condition any aid that goes to California, that goes to blue states, on them fixing their voting systems. Has to happen. We need credible elections. And the other thing that needs to happen is folks that pushed the myth that 2020 was the most perfect election to ever take place in the country, those folks, where they broke the law, must, and I mean must, be held accountable, must be criminally prosecuted. We have to have a truth reckoning on this. The left must be stripped of whatever remaining shreds of credibility it has. They lie. They misinform. The reason why the trans story in Colorado is so fascinating to me, aside from the sheer lunacy of taking somebody's kids because you disagree with forced sterilization that the state mandates that your kid have, if little Johnny comes home and says, Dad, I'm a girl. And if you disagree with it, they take your kid, right? The part that to me is the craziest is that the Democrats refuse to debate it in their House of Representatives there in the state of Colorado. They didn't want to debate it. And the reason they didn't want to debate it is there's no debating a person who disagrees with you. That's the short version of it. I played the clips just before the break. Those of you who are just joining us, I'm sorry you missed it. But one of the lead sponsors of the bill, this representative there, state representative, literally says, well, would we debate a civil rights bill with the KKK? No. This obviously, aside from it being a completely absurd argument, and a false dichotomy, the reason that they're saying this is the Democrats don't actually want to, the left doesn't actually want to engage in any debate about anything. They just want to declare that an expert has come along and said it's so, agreed with them, anointed their position, and they don't have to use logic, use reasoning, use persuasion to get alignment. They'll just call you a bigot. They'll call you a racist. They'll call you a homophobe, a transphobe. During COVID, they'll say, you want grandmas to die. An end of story. Straight out of, once again, a communist playbook. Now, there's a guy, his name is Krebs. Sounds like a James Bond villain. Anyway, this Krebs guy was a election security expert, okay? Yeah, right. And this is interesting. And I'm bringing this up because this is one of the people who, and he was a cybersecurity chief and the person who was tasked with, declaring the 2020 elections were secure. who went on television day in and day out to say the elections were fine. And it turns out that Trump is ordering a probe of him because he flat out lied. Statements he made, some even under oath, were absolutely untrue. So, I mean, by the way, here's a taste of it. This was Chris Krebs, November 2020 with Anderson Cooper. So this is just a taste of the kind of stuff that was, well, surrounding us all the time, telling us, oh, there's nothing to see here, folks.
It's completely and utterly surreal. None of these lies have been substantiated to any extent. Every single one of them has been debunked.
Chris Krebs was director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, charged with protecting the 2020 election. He called it the most secure election in American history, and days later was fired by President Trump.
How secure was the 2020 election? Let me put it this way. It was the most litigated. It was the most scrutinized. It was the most audited. This election was put through the ringer from so many different directions.
Oh, it's the most scrutinized, the most everything, the top of the tops. Nothing to see here, folks. Election in our nation's history. Now, I remember watching this, and I remember going, well, I remember saying this as a lawyer. I can't prove the fraud, but that doesn't mean that it didn't occur. And a statement like that is absurd. And I know it's absurd because I go to the polls and I see how easy it would be for somebody to fraudulently vote. Like, you don't have to be a genius. Again, you can just use your own gut instinct on this to know that there is fraud. So somebody who's in charge of monitoring the fraud and overseeing it and making our elections secure, if they come out and say, oh, it's absolutely flawless, how would you ever trust somebody like that? That was on 60 Minutes. Here he was later in the same month saying something similar. And this was Scott Pelley. First one was with Anderson Cooper. Listen to this.
There's no evidence that any machine that I'm aware of has been manipulated by a foreign power. Period.
Communist money from China and Cuba used to influence the election.
Look, I think we can go on and on with all the farcical claims that alleging interference in the 2020 election, but the proof is in the ballots. The recounts are consistent with the initial count, and to me, that's further evidence, that's confirmation that the systems used in the 2020 election performed as expected, and the American people should have 100% confidence in their vote.
So, by the way, on the 9th, so a couple days ago, Trump yanked his security clearance, Chris Krebs' security clearance, and referred him to the Department of Justice. He went as far as to say that treason was committed. And one of the things is that through CISA, which is the agency tasked with kind of protecting the elections, right? The security of the elections, that he repeatedly and baselessly denied that there were any problems with voting machines, any malfeasance, any vulnerabilities. None of it. Do you remember, speaking of Colorado, where the Secretary of State published the backdoor password to the voting machines there? Dumped it out on a website publicly available and easy to discover by anybody who'd be directly led to them. So this is this stuff. Now this has to, again, it's an important reckoning. And what I don't want people out there to say, Sam, we need to move on. No. We need to get to the bottom of what happened in 2020. We need to find out the truth, the real truth about January 6th. We need to find out the real truth about the election. No, we can't go back and make Trump president if, in fact, he won it. I don't even know maybe that Trump did win it or lose it? I don't know, but I want to. I want that answer. And I want every single person who broke the law to face prosecution. I want them to hire lawyers, to have to defend themselves, to have to go to trial. I don't care if we lose these cases. They need to be put through the ringer. Because if we do not do this, it will happen again and again and again. These people are cockroaches. They'll just come crawling back up out of the gutter into the next Democratic administration. And trust me, the Democrats will welcome all of these goofballs back with open arms. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. What's Right Show brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. By the way, speaking of this Krebs guy, head of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA or CISA, who has now been referred to the Department of Justice by Trump for investigation, possible prosecution for his role in the 2020 presidential election, interference and cover-up. Yehuda Miller, through the Freedom of Information Act FOIA request, as an investigative journalist, found out that there's some secret meeting that took place on Election Day in 2020 between, among others, folks from Dominion Voting Systems, the FBI, and CISA to go over the 2020 presidential election. Wonder what happened in that meeting. Just telling you, we got to get to the bottom of this. And incidentally, they want us to trust the experts, right? The guy that led this CISA group, the cybersecurity voting election expert guy in charge of this, who for years has been paraded about by Democrats as another, example, dispositive proof that the election was on the up and up. You know how many really brilliant experts have completely contested, have looked at the data and go, these votes simply do not make sense. This is not how votes get reported. It's not in line with any previous election. They go through it. They look at the data. The experts that were retained, by the way, by Professor John Eastman. And instead of Eastman being allowed to proceed in his constitutionally protected duty of representing his client, then former President Donald J. Trump, Eastman has, Fannie Willis files a case against him, and then he has this State Bar of California go after his law license and literally vote to have his law license taken from him. And what was his crime, by the way? I mean, we know his real crime was representing Donald Trump. But what the State Bar says in their decision to strip him of his law license, they say that Attorney John Eastman, Professor Eastman, who's a friend of mine, I've had him here on the program, that he was listening to the wrong experts. It was the claims that he was making on behalf of his client were discredited. This is what they want. If you let the left or the right, define truth and not allow you to question it, you don't have a democracy. It's a dictatorship. This is what the Chinese Communist Party does. This is what Stalin did. This is what Lenin did, right? This is how it operates. Ho Chi Minh, everybody. Hitler did this, right? You've got the official narrative, and if you stray from it, you're over, game over. You're excluded from polite society at best, or sent to a re-education camp / gulag / concentration camp at worst. If they can define truth, if they can define what is real and what isn't, elections have no consequences. They will tell people how to vote. And then the people will get in line, and the dictators remain dictators for life. Now, the advantage, the great advantage that we have as conservatives is that we have been in the political wilderness for years. Even when we have Republicans elected to, high office, we still, as conservatives, are on the outs. Nowhere has this been more prevalent than in the past 4 years, where some conservatives are so far on the outs that they have the full weight of the U.S. Department of Justice seeking long prison terms and getting them in some cases. The enduring memory of January 6th, the lasting legacy of it, will never be that it was an insurrection. It'll be the story of how one political party in the freest, bestest democracy in the world succeeded, albeit briefly, in jailing their political opponents. That's the legacy of J6. And similarly, these efforts to define the rightness of define the rightness of experts and their infallibility, as long as they're in alignment with official government positions, well, we got to fight against this. Because if we don't, right, these people they're all waiting to come back. Trust me. If Biden, if Kamala Harris or whoever became president in 2028 or 2029, they would absolutely come back, all of them. And then they would make sure that the changes occur so that they never lose power again. So got to clean it up. Got to prosecute these people. Don't second guess Trump. Go at it all the way. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840. Have a great weekend, folks. I'll see you Monday. Be safe out there and don't despair. We got this. I promise.